Always very pleased to come to this institution, both in this gallery, and I'll be even more excited to be able to head across the road towards the end of next year and to explore the new spaces. So yes, I grew up in Auckland and I have long been an attender to things at the Auckland Art Gallery, and indeed it has been instrumental to my career path that I've chosen and developed. Now, I am a complete contemporary art fan, and so the Walters Prize is always an exciting point on my calendar to see what people, not only what people are making, but what this venerable selection of 4 jury members have selected to be the pinnacles, the kind of 4 highlights within contemporary art happening over about a 2-year period. I have in the past had the opportunity to be on that jury, and it's an incredible process because you get sort of a phone call or a sort of secret meeting with Mr. Chris Sains or another representative, and you get invited to be a juror. You have to keep it completely secret, you're not allowed to tell anyone, and you don't know who the other jurors are. And it's your mission to go around and look at as much contemporary art that you can, both in Auckland but also around the country, to come to a jury meeting, to then, when you walk into a room and you all of a sudden discover who the other members of the jury are, and then you sit down, and by the end of that day you need to have come up with your shortlist. Certainly in the time that I did it, it was an amazingly robust but also quite extraordinarily kind of calm process. There was no blood on the floor at all. But obviously we can have no insights into the 4 jury members this time round, but what they have done is selected 4 fascinating projects, and interestingly the selection is based on a body of work, so it's not based on the artist. It's not a sort of a lifetime's achievement career award, it's based on a knockout project or show. Fascinatingly, this time round, if you've read the little lovely catalogue, which is definitely very much worth reading, Mr. Ron Brownson, who's with us today, lovely to see you, Ron, has written some really great texts. I thoroughly recommend if you pick this up. But you will see on sort of the first page, where these projects were initially shown. So here we've got Dan Arps, Fiona Connor, I love these photos, Saskia Leek and Alex Monteith. And the spaces where the projects were first exhibited, spanning from left to right: Gambier Castle, Auckland, which is an artist-run project space up on Karangahape Road, Michael Lett Gallery, a dealer gallery on Karangahape Road, Ivan Anthony Gallery, a dealer gallery on Karangahape Road, and finally Alex's show, St Paul Street, no bias there, AUT University Auckland. The ages of the artists span from 1970 through to 1981 in terms of birth dates, so that's only an 11-year stretch. And what I find particularly frightening is when artists born in the 1980s are achieving such significant projects now. It shows my age. But I think it's incredibly interesting that the 4 artists that have been selected are comparatively young. And note, not said with pride, having been someone that's been working in a civic metropolitan art gallery, that none of the shows that have been nominated have come from public art galleries or larger civic spaces. You know, for me that's very interesting in terms of the jury's observation of where the most critical and energised practice is being displayed. Now obviously, you know, the jury's recommendation are the thinking of four esteemed people, but it is also only 4 people. And whenever I think about the Walters Prize, I always think you all have your own individual lists of what you think have been the 4 most interesting things that you've seen this time round. Hi, come on in. So what I'd like to do today is to look at each of the 4 projects individually, to sort of talk a little bit about them, to field your questions if there are any particular works or pieces of the installation that you find puzzling or troubling or, you know, transcendental. Please do make yourselves heard. It certainly isn't going to be a talk fest with me talking at you, I hope. Does anyone have any other questions about the Walters Prize, about how it is formulated, what its kind of purpose or function is? Or do you all feel kind of okay on that? Okay. How many of you have actually seen the show before? Have you spent any time in it? Okay. So, for a lot of you, this is first time in. Okay, that's going to be really interesting. Well, we're sitting in and amongst the installation by Dan Arps called Explaining Things. And as you can see, we're surrounded by objects, some of which don't necessarily look like what we might think art should be. For example, there's a screwed up piece of paper here on the floor. We've got sort of semi-decrepit garden furniture, which interestingly the artist is happy for people to sit on, whereas most often is the case in art exhibitions. It's a bit confusing as to whether or not you're allowed to touch or not touch objects. Very often it's the latter. So here we've got a site for meeting or communing or reading. The artist has also supplied us in the cardboard box just behind you guys with a really interesting kind of reader / list of works which people are most welcome to grab. And it gives a list of works on the back, but more significantly it's got a whole lot of sort of online communication from a website called, is it 4chan? 4chan.net, which is a kind of an interesting kind of conversation / kind of download sort of dump site for opinion and thought, often critical, anti-establishment, kind of all sorts of interesting, bordering on sort of conspiracy theory discussions, etc. Now, Dan, as an artist, likes to focus on the detritus of the urban environment. So everything that we see around us, he has most likely found or been given or stumbled across. So we see a whole lot of pieces of our visual and material culture around us, from a sort of defunct sign there, which I know because I've seen that in Dan's lounge probably about 3-4 years ago, has been an object that he's been sort of looking at and sort of percolating about, thinking about how it could be used within an installation. And when I use the term installation, that's very much how Dan operates, where he thinks about the whole site, the whole space. So this room is like a little mini universe, and it's populated by sort of single discrete sculptures, but they have, there's a lot of conversation going on between the different objects. The title is interesting, Explaining Things. I like to think about who's doing the explaining and from what position of authority, and who are they explaining to? Who is the audience for the explanation? We've got pretty crazy kind of diagrams here that are meant to give us some kind of insight, in this case to the space-time, energy, mass, world nexus. You know, but this information is sometimes pretty impenetrable, sometimes a bit confusing. What you get presented within Dan's work is a whole lot of kind of snapshots which collectively kind of build up a bit of a picture. On the television sitting on the floor, there's a whole lot of excerpts from YouTube.